You've just been hit hard at the Battle of Coral Sea. One of your key aircraft carriers, the USS Yorktown, is limping back to Pearl Harbor, badly damaged, scarred from bombs, her hull torn open, fuel tanks ruptured, electrical systems fried. Japanese intelligence sees her state and does the math. This thing is out of commission for at least 90 days. No way she's making a comeback anytime soon. And yet 3 days later, she's back in the Pacific, sailing straight into the Battle of Midway.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
On-deck repair operation that didn't just save a ship, it helped flip the script of World War II in the Pacific. Let's rewind. May 1942. The USS Yorktown returns to Pearl Harbor after the Battle of Coral Sea with serious battle damage. She's alive, but barely. Naval engineers take one look and estimate she needs 3 months of repairs to be seaworthy again. And that's being optimistic. But here's the catch. U.S. codebreaker station Hypo had just cracked Japan's naval communications. They knew a massive attack was coming. They knew where and when. Midway, early June. That gave the U.S. Navy only days to get ready. Without Yorktown, they'd be dangerously outnumbered. So the decision was made. No time for perfection. No time for protocol. Just get her patched up, fast. What followed was one of the most intense, fast-paced engineering miracles in naval history. 1,400 workers swarmed the ship the moment she docked. Welders, electricians, pipefitters, engineers. They worked non-stop, day and night, around the clock. No breaks, no delays. They didn't rebuild. They improvised. Instead of replacing every damaged part, they patched holes with steel plates, welded over bomb-damaged sections, cemented ruptured fuel tanks, rerouted blown-out electrical systems. They did what needed to be done, not what the manual said to do. It was the kind of repair job that would make a perfectionist cry. But it worked. In just 3 days, 72 hours, Yorktown went from crippled to combat-ready. That kind of turnaround didn't just stretch the limits of engineering, it completely shattered expectations of what was possible. This was American industrial philosophy at its most raw. Speed over style. Function over form. Not because it was easier, but because it was necessary. While Japanese naval doctrine emphasized craftsmanship, precision, and deliberate repairs, the American approach in this moment was the exact opposite. It was dirty, improvised, but devastatingly effective. And it worked because everyone bought in. From the Navy brass to the dockyard crews, everyone understood the stakes. They weren't just repairing a ship, they were racing a clock. So when Yorktown set sail days later, Japanese command had no idea. Their last intel showed her barely staying afloat. Seeing her at Midway was like watching a ghost rise from the ocean. And that ghost played a massive role in what came next. The Battle of Midway was already stacked high with tension. The U.S. knew what was coming thanks to code breaking, but they were still outnumbered. Yorktown's presence was the equalizer. Her aircraft launched some of the decisive strikes of the battle. And when Japanese pilots finally located her, they believed she had to be a different carrier. There was no way it could be Yorktown. She was supposed to be in dry dock. But there she was, launching planes, taking hits, fighting back. Her role at Midway directly contributed to the sinking of 3 Japanese carriers. 3? That wasn't just a tactical win, it was a turning point. It permanently shifted the balance of naval power in the Pacific. And here's the part that really hits. That outcome was only possible because of those 72 hours. Because of those 1,400 workers who refused to let her go down. We talk a lot about firepower and strategy in war, but this was raw human will. It was resilience poured into steel. Yorktown's rapid repair wasn't just a one-time miracle. It rewrote the doctrine for damage control. The techniques used, improvised welds, sealed tanks, rerouted power, became standard practice. The idea that a ship didn't need to be flawless to fight, just functional, changed the way navies thought about survivability and repair. And it exposed a deeper truth in the Pacific War: speed, adaptability, and collective effort could outperform even the most finely crafted battle plans. Because the Japanese approach, meticulous and slow, simply couldn't respond in time. Their repair system wasn't built for improvisation. When something was broken, it was out of service for months. There was no Yorktown-style comeback. American industrial democracy became a weapon, a strategic asset, a system that let workers take initiative, think creatively, and throw out the rulebook when time ran out. Yorktown didn't return to Midway because someone followed the manual. She returned because thousands of people refused to accept defeat. That mindset, urgency over elegance, results over routine, turned the tide. And it didn't end there. The legacy of Yorktown's repair lived on.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
When engineers, sailors, welders, and command staff all said, "We'll make it work," and then did, there's something fundamentally powerful in that. A belief that the rules can bend, that the impossible is negotiable if people are willing to push hard enough. And that mindset, that's what Midway represents. Not just a battle, but a belief. So when Yorktown rolled into the biggest naval confrontation in the Pacific with steel patches still warm from the welds, it wasn't just a ship returning to war. It was a message. You thought we were out. Watch us fight anyway. In 3 days, a wreck became a warship again. And in doing so, she helped win one of the most important battles of the 20th century. If this story doesn't make you rethink what determination and teamwork can pull off, I don't know what will. So, if you found this breakdown wild, impressive, or just plain jaw-dropping, hit that like button, share this video with someone who appreciates real engineering grit, and drop a comment below. What's the most impressive comeback story you've ever heard? And of course, subscribe for more true stories of human chaos, ingenuity, and the moments that turned history on its head. The USS Yorktown wasn't just a ship. For those 72 hours in Pearl Harbor, she became a symbol, a living, breathing challenge to everything the enemy thought they understood about American capability. Let's talk about what that surprise actually meant. When Japanese forces saw Yorktown off Midway, they didn't panic, not at first. They assumed this was a different carrier. They had to. Because based on everything they believed, everything their intelligence told them, Yorktown was still being overhauled at Pearl Harbor, maybe even scrapped. So, when American planes started taking off from her deck and striking back, the shock wasn't just tactical, it was psychological. It told them, you don't know what we're capable of. You don't know how fast we move. You don't know how hard we come back. That's the moment the illusion cracked. Because for all of Japan's early victories in the Pacific, their planning was based on predictability. They believed American forces were slower, softer, more reliant on rigid process. They expected months of downtime for major repairs. A 90-day carrier turnaround. Standard. Logical. But this wasn't logic. This was chaos, and it was organized, relentless, American-made chaos. What the Japanese didn't realize, and what became painfully clear at Midway, was that the United States had something they didn't. A workforce that could bend reality under pressure. A system that wasn't built on hierarchy and rigidity, but on initiative, hustle, and, yes, a little controlled madness. Those 1,400 men who worked around the clock on Yorktown. They didn't wait for permission to innovate. They saw the problem, and they fixed it with whatever they had. They sealed gaping holes with makeshift patches. They shoved cement into broken tanks. They rewired entire systems just to make sure she could launch planes again. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't pretty. But it worked. And here's the deeper layer: this wasn't a one-off event. This was the American war machine hitting its stride. Not because it was perfect, but because it was built to adapt. That flexibility, that speed, that ability to say good enough, now go, that's what changed the war. Yorktown made it to Midway. She fought hard. She took more damage again. She was hit by bombs, torpedoes, and still stayed in the fight longer than anyone thought possible. At one point during the battle, she took a direct hit that knocked out her power. The crew scrambled to restore it in minutes. Why? Because they knew what it meant to stay operational. There was no backup. No time for standard procedures. Just keep going. And they did. Even when she finally sank days later, Yorktown had already done the job. Her aircraft had helped sink Soryu and Hiryu, two of Japan's prized carriers. Her very presence had thrown off enemy calculations. Her crew's resilience had pushed the U.S. into the driver's seat of the Pacific theater. And the kicker? This entire sequence, this chain reaction of victories only happened because of those 72 hours. Because of the decision to reject the timeline, to toss the repair manual, and say, let's get her back. Now, let's not gloss over how radical that was. Naval operations at the time didn't move that way. Ships were repaired by the book, but there was no time for books. The U.S. Navy gambled, and the workers delivered. That collaboration between high command and the hands-on laborers is something we don't talk about enough. It wasn't just Admiral Nimitz making the call. It wasn't just codebreakers doing the math. It was electricians with oil on their hands. Welders sweating through blowtorches. pipefitters rerouting systems blind. It was collective will from top to bottom. This was industrial democracy in its rawest form. Everyone had a part, and nobody could afford to fall short. Think about what that says, not just about the battle, but about the mindset. The Japanese forces approached warfare through a lens of precision, ritual, and honor. Their ships were immaculately constructed, their procedures exacting. But that kind of perfection comes at a cost: speed. In contrast, the American approach at Midway, personified by Yorktown, was about momentum. Keep moving, fix it fast, push through the chaos. It's not that one philosophy was inherently better than the other, but in this moment, with these stakes, speed and improvisation were the difference between victory and disaster. Midway wasn't just a battle won with bullets. It was won with welding torches, sleepless nights, and a refusal to accept the word impossible. And that's the part that sticks. That's the legacy. Because when you look at how this story influenced everything that came after, from naval doctrine to industrial design to emergency response training, you see a through line. Yorktown's patchwork resurrection became a case study in how to turn desperation into strategy. Navies around the world started rethinking how they approached damage control. Instead of planning for perfection, they started planning for resilience. They began asking, how fast can we get this thing back into the fight? Instead of how perfect can we make it again? And the lesson stuck. Even today, military planners cite the Yorktown repair as a pivotal moment, not because it was neat, but because it was necessary. Because it forced innovation under duress. Because it proved that in war, and in life, sometimes good enough now beats perfect later. And maybe that's the core message. That when the stakes are high, when the pressure is unbearable, the real strength lies in collective effort. In moving fast, thinking creatively, and refusing to give up even when every system says you should. Yorktown may have gone down days after Midway, but her impact was already sealed. Her story became a rallying cry. A reminder that grit beats blueprint, and that even a broken warship can change the course of history when it refuses to stay down. That's what makes this more than a war story. It's a study in pressure, in teamwork, in human will. It's what happens when people stop asking for instructions and start asking, what can I do? So yeah, the 72-hour repair of Yorktown was unprecedented. It defied logic, engineering norms, and enemy expectations. But it wasn't just an outlier. It was a warning shot across the Pacific. We're not going down easy. And if a damaged, bomb-rattled carrier can be back in the fight 3 days later, what can't we do? The wildest part, no one handed out medals to those 1,400 workers. No grand speeches, no film reels. But they were the unsung heroes behind one of the most pivotal victories in naval history. And they did it quietly, in heat and grease and noise, while the clock ticked down to catastrophe. There's a reason the Japanese couldn't believe what they were seeing at Midway. Because they weren't just seeing a repaired ship, they were seeing a total rejection of how they thought war worked. They had assumed that the Americans would respond like they would, methodically, slowly, by the book. But Yorktown, that ship screamed a different philosophy entirely. It wasn't just that she was back, it was how she came back, held together with welded seams, patched bulkheads, and systems barely strung together with cables and sweat. She shouldn't have been able to sail, let alone launch aircraft, coordinate attacks, and absorb fresh battle damage. But she did. She did all of that, and more. And this wasn't about luck. It wasn't a fluke. It was the direct result of a system that empowered people to solve problems on the fly, to move fast, to work together without red tape strangling the process. The term industrial democracy might sound abstract or bureaucratic, but this was it in action. Decisions weren't trapped at the top. Authority was distributed. Everyone from senior officers to junior mechanics was working toward the same deadline, and no one was too important to get their hands dirty. And that's what allowed a crippled warship to be turned around in 3 days while Japanese estimations were off by a full 87. That gap, those missing days, was everything. It created the surprise. It delivered the shock. And it fractured Japan's strategic confidence right when the US needed that edge. Think about that. The margin between we're losing this war and we just crushed 3 enemy carriers was 72 hours. Not more guns, not more ships, just more urgency. Even after the fact, Japan never fully recalibrated. Their war strategy had been built on the assumption that the US would be slow and reactive. But Yorktown proved otherwise. That ship's return was a thunderclap, a message written in steel. We're faster than you think. And we don't need perfect, we need ready. And that idea bled into every part of the US war effort after Midway. It became a guiding principle. Build it fast, fix it faster, keep moving, adapt or fall behind. It's hard to overstate how radical that was in the middle of a global war. While some nations were bogged down by procedure, the US embraced chaos. They weaponized improvisation. That meant producing Liberty ships in weeks. That meant frontline airfields constructed almost overnight. That meant taking a ship like Yorktown, nearly written off, and sending her back into battle as a fully operational threat. There's a sort of brutal poetry in it. Because Yorktown didn't survive Midway, she took more hits, stayed afloat for days, but eventually, she sank. But her contribution? Permanent. Her presence forced Japanese commanders to make rushed decisions. Her aircraft helped bring down carriers they couldn't afford to lose. Her repairs became a blueprint for every rapid turnaround that came afterward. She didn't need to survive the battle. She changed it. And it leaves you thinking, what if she hadn't made it? What if those workers had followed the book? Taken 90 days instead of 3. You lose Yorktown at Midway, and suddenly the US is outnumbered. You lose her aircraft, and maybe those Japanese carriers survive. You lose that shock factor, and the tide of the war turns a little slower or maybe not at all. All of it hinged on a decision: push the limit, or play it safe. They pushed, and the war shifted. The Yorktown story isn't just about World War II. It's about what people can do when no one gives them the option to quit. When leadership trusts them to figure it out. When a crew, a workforce, a country says, we're not ready to lose yet. That's the kind of story that sticks with you. Because it's not about some flawless strategy executed to perfection. It's about chaos, pressure, exhaustion, and the refusal to roll over. It's about steel fused with stubbornness. So when you look back at Midway and try to understand how the underdog pulled it off, don't just look at the battleships and flight plans. Look at the blowtorches in Pearl Harbor. The sparks flying through the night. The men who didn't sleep, didn't stop, didn't blink, because they knew that every hour mattered. That's where the battle was won before the planes ever took off. Yorktown showed the world that speed, resolve, and a little creative engineering could defy every prediction. She was supposed to be on the sidelines. Instead, she was in the center of the storm. Thanks so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, you're officially part of the small percentage of people who don't just click away, and that means a lot. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts, your ideas, or even what you'd like to see next. I read every single one of them, and your feedback genuinely shapes the direction of this channel. If you enjoyed the video, tap that like button. It tells YouTube this content is worth sharing. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next upload. We've got more exciting videos coming, and trust me, you'll want to be here for them. This channel is just getting started, and your support helps it grow faster than you realize. Thank you again for spending a part of your day here with me. Stay curious, stay motivated, and as always, take care of yourself. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.